Have you ever attended a networking event with great expectations and then walked out disappointed? Well, that's happened to me a lot, but not in this case. I met today's guest, Ellen Tyler, as a serendipitous meeting when I attended a networking event at the beginning of this year. It was built up to be this great place to meet all kinds of people. And I thought, if I walk out with one great connection, today will be a win. Well, boy, was I surprised. So, Ellen Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. I almost have the same type of story. I almost didn't come to that event.
Yes. And so I know that when things like that happen, like people are supposed to meet. And immediately when we began to talk, you started speaking my language of possibilities versus barriers. And when you mentioned you studied with Bob Proctor, I knew you were my person. I knew immediately you were my person. So as I do with most of my guests, is I went on LinkedIn, I did some research and saw that what your profile says is you bring sparkle to women entrepreneurs and leaders. You break growth barriers, silencing the incessant chatter. But you also describe yourself as a business mindset and sales coach. So my first question is, that's a lot of ground that you cover. Where is it that you usually start?
So I start with a pretty simple statement. I always tell people I'm the business coach that doesn't care about your business.
Okay, unpack that, please.
Yes. We get so enmeshed in thinking that if I'm a realtor, I have to work with a real estate coach. If I'm in the financial world, I have to hire a financial coach. And what that does is that it sets up this false sense that they have the magic, whatever, marketing or operations to do and work in real estate, which at the end of the day, it really is. I get to help people learn and study themselves so they know themselves better, because at every single level they are in their business growth and sales, they are going to have that incessant chatter in their head. And new level, new devil.
Yes. Love that. New level, new devil. So when we talk about this incessant chatter in our head, do you see some things coming up for people of the type of conversations that are going on in their minds?
Well, it'll be different for every person. I just look for, we call them paradigms, fancy word, which just really means what are they afraid of? What are the hurdles that they have not been able to get over on their own? And what are the excuses? Because it's always an excuse. It will start with something, but I'd like to do it, but. And whatever comes after the but is really just their first line of defense, which is that worry, doubt, and anxiety that's going on in their head. If we talk to our best friends like we talk to ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends. We're so hard on ourselves, so hard. And I was just talking to a client earlier and she said roughly the same thing, but she said, do other people have the same problem? Everybody has this problem. So my new favorite question, because, and Lisa, you know this, as a coach, we tend to work with people like who we were and who we are.
Yes.
I have a really active mind which has that chatter going on. And so I've learned to ask people, do you wake up in what some people would say middle of the night, which for some of us, it's like, well, I'll just get up, and that your mind doesn't shut off and you can't go back to sleep. It's a big clue. The woman I sat with this morning, she said something to that. I go, oh, you're my people. She said she would get upset when her husband would get up and go to the bathroom because now she's awake and it's 3 a.m. He said, oh, your mind has a hold of you.
Yes. So that does happen very often, is we have so much in our head during the day that we have a hard time detaching from it. And when we wake up and become conscious again, it immediately pops back in. Mm-hmm. So where do you start working with people on that, Ellen?
With their morning. It really is to understand, allergies, going to do that. How our day happens is how good we set up the day. It really is. So when you think about it, it's when we were learning how to drive a car, we didn't just get in the car and go. Like our parents didn't give us the key and go, here you go. You had to plan and prepare and practice and do different things. So it's no different in the work that I get to help clients understand is that they have the ability to plan and prepare and practice their day. And we start simply, which is, what are you so grateful for? What are you so grateful for? One of the first things should be, I'm so happy and grateful that I actually woke up and I'm awake and alive. But I also find this the hardest thing for my clients with how to plan and prepare the day. Sometimes I have morning calls, and my favorite question to ask, and everybody should ponder this, is what went well yesterday? What went well yesterday or the week? If we can't practice that, our mind is automatically looking for the opposite. Mm-hmm. So if I start the morning and go, well, what went well yesterday? I'm going to start looking for those good things again. Mm-hmm. So that's just basic. We do a lot of studying in the morning. We just do a lot of feeding the word gets used almost way too much, which is mindset. Now people hear mindset, manifestation, affirmations, and they about want to glaze over. But what they don't really understand is that this is proven over and over for decades and hundreds of years of why it works to do that. It's just helping them know what works best for them in the morning, and then to help them understand if we become what we think about all day long. I said all day long, not just in the morning. Then we should take time out during the day, not just work. And so many of us were raised just to work hard, work more, work longer hours, be more efficient, be more focused. When in reality, it's if I take 10 minutes and think about what my goal is, that's more beneficial to me and my goal than 10 minutes of work. And then we just bookend it at the end of the day. What went well? What do I want to do a little bit different tomorrow? We can do 1% different every day. Go pretty far in a year.
Yes. There's so much in what you said. I love the thought of having a morning practice, almost to think about it like you're setting your table for the day, to making sure you not only have the tools to execute your day in a way that would help you reach your goal, but also to be prepared and be mindful about what you're entering into. I think so many times, because we are set up with this lesson that to be successful, we have to hustle and grind, use and maximize every minute, that we don't take that time to pause. So Ellen, I have a question about this, what went well yesterday. Mm-hmm. Is there a better time to do that? Like, would it be better to do it at night before you go into sleep, where your conscious brain gets a chance to reset of saying what went well today and getting anything off your plate, maybe even writing it down, so you don't churn that through your mind? Or is it better to do it as you start the day, or both?
Both is the answer. And I'm going to think, so one of my favorite authors is Neville Goddard. And for everyone that knows me, they know I like the old books, meaning that the reason that I like the old authors is that it hasn't changed. We haven't changed what we say to do. And actually, when they wrote this, Power of Awareness, I think, was written in the 1930s or 1940s, is that they actually didn't water it down. And I just say that because sometimes now we want to be nice and we don't want to offend anyone and we don't want to have them think, well, yes, you have to do some work to get what you want. But Neville Goddard talks about the two opportune times where you can really program your subconscious. And what I want people to hear and understand is that our subconscious controls all of our actions. So, whether we like to do something or not, we think we have willpower over this. You really don't. You have to figure out how to get yourself to accept this. But Neville talks about the two best times. One is at night before you're going to sleep. So for most people, there's this period of time, it's a lull time, and they can they're kind of sleepy and drifting off to sleep. I actually have the opposite. I fall asleep like in a minute, like boom, boom, boom. So I have to actually I can't even lay down. I will sit up in bed, and it's to think about, Neville explains it as the ability to see yourself at the goal. And the story he gave in the book was his client, Neville, wanted to go visit his brother in Barbados, and Abdullah, who was his coach and mentor, said, then every night as you drift off to sleep, I want you to drift off to sleep in your brother's house in the bedroom. So that helps people understand when we say, think of the goal. And it's that point in time that your subconscious will accept it. And then it has all night. It has all night to let that marinate in there. The next time is in the morning. So when we wake up, it's one of the reasons why morning routines are so successful, but it's also another great time to feed that into our subconscious. Now, whether somebody does it right away when they wake up, or they just have an hour of what their routine is, but it's to sit quietly. I don't care if they want to use the word meditate or visualize, but it is, can you get to the point where you can feel it? So I'll give an example, because when we talk about money, people are like, how do I feel money? One of my first jobs was working in a bank as a bank teller. And you had to take new dollar bills. If anybody was a bank teller, they're going to know this. You had to turn it and flip them over, one on one way, one on the other side. But it was the feel of a crisp dollar bill as you were doing that. He said, so if I'm thinking about money, that's what I'm thinking of. You can come up with all different ideas. In fact, I actually tell my clients, before it's the morning or before you're doing your 10 minutes of thinking, have a couple notes written down. Oh, if I think about money, I'm going to think about the flipping of the money. Oh, if I think about my new beach house, it's what does the handle feel like when I'm opening it? But two best times of the day, morning and night. Window to the
That's
phone.
great. That's great. And, as you bring up the idea that we talk about mindset, manifestation, affirmations, all of those things, when you are referencing yourself as a business mindset and sales coach, my question is, do people come to you and say, I need a mindset coach? Or are they coming to you because something is in their business that they want to shift? Where do you see? Because here's what I know. When people come to us, there's one thing they want. But as professionals and experts, it doesn't take long before we speak with them and we see the problem and we know what they need. So how do you manage that tension of what people are coming to you for?
I can tell you this. Nobody sets out to hire a mindset coach.
Yes.
It just doesn't happen. I had one person one time on the way to a meeting where I was speaking say she needed to hire a business coach. Now, again, these are just words that can have different connotations at different levels where you are in the business. So our role, especially as coaches, is to help identify where the challenge is. Because you're right, we're like diagnosticians. It's like a doctor. It's well, if they knew what the problem was and they knew how to fix it, they would have fixed it.
Exactly.
So it's our ability to either drop a seed of where the frustration is. And so there's that an 8 a.m. meeting this morning, and I play around with what I say all the time. And today it really was, I called myself peak performance. Again, that doesn't really matter. Peak performance coach who gets to work with business owners who have had some success, had some backslide. And they're now upset that their friend in the same business had the J-curve quantum leap. I go, would you like to have the quantum leap? Because then come talk to me. So it's usually around a frustration. And with with business owners and with sales, it is about you look around the playing field and you recognize other people are doing better. And you're going, they're not any smarter. No, they're not. It has nothing to do with smartness. It has a lot to do with what they're doing to have that result. So I usually phrase it in, where are their frustrations? And coming from sales, so I'm an introverted salesperson. People think it's a puzzle. All an introvert means is that at the end of the day, when all is said and done, I just want quiet. Doesn't mean I don't love having conversations like this, but selling has such an image in people's head that is one of the challenges that they'll come in for. It's usually my income's stuck. I'm working way too many hours. I left the corporate world and now I'm working 80 hours and I'm in every single role in the company. And I don't know how to go from being the talent to the CEO. So it's really more in just, where are the frustrations popping out in their business?
Yes. No, and I think that's good. I think when we pause as business owners long enough to look up and look to say, this is not what I got into business for. This was not the dream I had of freedom and flexibility, all of those things that we think that come with entrepreneurship or owning a business, and getting to the point where it is painful enough for you to realize that I need to ask for help. It's time for me to ask for help. Maybe it's even time for me to have an exploratory conversation, because the idea of coaching is now growing more and more. There's more coaches now than ever, and there's more types of coaches now than ever. So as you're working with people, and I know I do this as well, as I speak with potential clients, they're looking at us of, do I want to work with them? What are some key things that you are looking for to know if this client would be a good fit for you?
So there's a couple things I will ask. One is, have they worked with a coach before? And not necessarily like in what you and I do. It could just be, I played sports or I played a musical instrument. And actually those are two really telling components. If I find somebody has that background, they understand the idea of coaching. The challenge for us as coaches is when somebody has never worked with a coach and don't understand it, don't know what it looks like, don't know why somebody would, why would I spend that money? What are you going to do that's so different? And I go back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago, is that our role is to ask questions to make them uncomfortable, but then to give them the path of how this will help them. I always tell people, coaches become coaches because I get to coach myself, and I get to read and listen to podcasts and all those different things. But our role is also to help them understand it's not one and done. And see, that was part of my story. I was a one and done. I thought that's what it was. I hired Bob the first time and then I'm done. I don't need to do this anymore. And then you wake up a few years later and you go, wait a second. We're always working on goals. And I know my purpose and the route that I took is to help my clients understand it is not one and done, is that you cannot get to where you want to be on your own. Like we can get so far, but that if they can accept that the person that they want to be exists, coaches' roles are to give them the tools and the techniques to transition to that. I always tell people, my job is to let you study you and help you get from where you are to where you want to be. So if they've been coached, great. But actually my follow-up question to people who have been coaches is, did you finish the program?
Yes.
And if not, why not? And when I hear something, but, there's that word again. I always want to know what's different this time.
Yes. Yes. Oh, really great questions. And what I love about about what you said there, Ellen, is that person open to being coached? Because I've had conversations with people before, and at one point I did work with a person that I didn't pay attention to the red flag, and they were not coachable. They had all the answers. They already knew. And I thought, well, what am I doing here? If we're not moving along. This is a partnership. But you're exactly right. We can see things in people that they can't see in themselves. And the same for me. I have a coach because I don't have that awareness to do that. And, as long as we're still here on this planet, there is always room for evolvement and room for growth. So I love that you are looking at past behavior and what they are coming to the table when looking for coaches to really explore, is that going to be a good fit? So let's talk a little bit about sales and what we've been groomed to believe about sales and how we think about ourselves can set us up for success when it comes to a sales call.
Yeah.
So imagine that client who is struggling with sales. How do you dig in and figure out what's really going on there?
Yeah, sales is really an interesting topic for most people. We all sell, whether we think we do or not. And I've had this conversation when somebody works in corporate and they think they're not selling. I ask, how many promotions have you had? Because you did sell to get that next promotion. One of my favorite questions in the very beginning is, what is their image of a salesperson? Like, what's their first recollection? See, as a child, I didn't like returning things. Like, I was shy growing up, all those words again that go with it. But I learned that selling is a skill. So if I learned how to study, I learned how to cook, I learned how to drive a car, I learned a foreign language, I'm like, this is just a skill. But what happens in selling is now this is where all of everything in their head is going on. And they can start out with the best intentions. And I'll explain it like this to someone. And I'll always talk about selling because it's a component of our life. That, or I talk about Krispy Kreme donuts and wanting to lose weight. But selling is about their money. So you can start out with the best intentions and understand that you need to have conversations with people. And your role might include the dreaded word cold calling. Oh my gosh, I have to call somebody I don't know. And you should make 10 of those calls a day. And Monday you start, you make 8 calls. And Tuesday you start and you make 5 calls. And Wednesday work just blows up and you make no calls. And so by the end of the week, you have not consistently done those 10. And this is where people use those words. We talked about this before, is that why do they procrastinate against doing those activities? They don't realize it is what they think about selling that has control of them. And so we think, I should have willpower. I should be able to work my way through this and just tick off the calls. You don't have a chance when it's what you believe about selling. So the work becomes, if this is a learned skill, nobody's going to hang up on me. And if they do hang up on me, out of the billion people on the planet, I'm going to call somebody else. And so it really is to help people come up with we call it the highlight reel. Actually, this was from a sports psychologist, which is things that I've done well that I just remind myself. If somebody does hang up on me, then call one of your best clients and have a conversation with them before you get back on the call. Best time to make phone calls is actually when you sold something. Go make some more calls. But it's just learning a new skill. And you sit there and you go, if I could, I've jumped out of an airplane. If I can jump out of an airplane, I probably can call 10 people.
Well, I have not jumped out of an airplane, Ellen, and I'm admire you for that courage to do that. But you're right. It's so important, the energy that you bring into as you have that sales call. Are you sending out the vibe that I'm just in it to make the sale? Or is this something where you truly care about learning? What is it that they're dealing with? Is this a relationship that you're interested in building? And how can you help them overcome that?
Yep.
I think that's really important.
Some managers in some industries have it worse. And in fact, the industry I left is one of the worst. Financial services and in the advisory role. And I'll put the asterisk. Financial advisors provide a great service for a lot of people because it's knowledge and experience that helps their clients get to the road they're wanting to go to. But when you're working at a big institution that cares about their numbers, what did we close this month? And in that world, you only live on 30-day cycles, which is really only 21-day cycles, because that last week of the month for a salesperson, this is why somebody will say, I don't understand why I can't close. Because that last week, and especially in financial services, managers will want to know, what are you closing today, Ellen? What are you closing? How about that? Are you going to close this one, this one, this one? And I'm having a conversation with a client that I know we're going to do great work with, but what energy do you think I'm giving off? I got to close them. I got to close them. That's like the worst thing in the world to think. I'm not helping him. He's got to help me because I've got a manager. And inevitably what would happen is that those people would go next week, because next week was the beginning of the new month. Companies that understand this are not 30 days focused. They're longer focused with what are you doing on a longer term. And yes, look at metrics and then look at the projection of where the movement is going. But it also then gives you the opportunity to start righting the ship of selling and finding where things aren't. Do I need help? Selling is having a conversation and selling is serving.
Yes. And I think that Wolf of Wall Street mentality of cold calling and forcefully selling and, convincing somebody and promising them anything to get that sale is just, again, one thing that comes back on us. So, Ellen, several times you've referenced some of your past being this introverted salesperson, the financial services. How did you move from that to becoming a coach and being able to help people see the potential of what they think to tie with their success?
Yep. Well, I certainly didn't set out to change my career. And I think that's the best way for people to understand. In the career that I was before this, I hired coaches, and the first coach I ever hired was Bob Proctor. So I always think, I got the luck of the draw. So the first one out of the gate was one of the best of the business who was studied by a lot of other individuals with how he was able to do what he did. And as I mentioned, I worked with him and then I didn't. I was like, oh, okay. But I love to read. I'm curious. I gather information. And at a certain point in that last iteration in my corporate life, and I thought I would end my career in financial services and actually never end. I don't think people should race towards retirement. I don't care what they're doing. They should have, what do I want to do to be of service and bring value? But in the financial world, you could see that you long-term, 80, 90, doesn't matter the age. And then when I went back and hired Bob for the last time that I hired him, they were growing the coaching and consulting division. And for most, it's like right place, right storm, right problem, just all coalesced together. And what had happened is that in that last company, they had put a lot of us relationship-driven financial advisors in 100% selling role. Like 100%, like that's all I did all day long. I didn't get to have relationships with people. And most of us then became really uncomfortable and not happy. So what do you do when you're not happy? You start looking for answers. And I
Yes.
discovered at that point, this was about 2017 probably, I discovered Bob was still alive at that point. He passed 2 years ago. And he was doing a weekend program. And I'm like, well, I'm not that crazy twice. I had significant movement when I worked with him. And so I thought, I'm hiring him again. And 3 months in, they were growing the coaching and consulting division. And the offer was, would you like to be mentored by Bob Proctor and Sandy Gallagher and have your own coaching business? Which, as a lot of my friends and peers in financial services couldn't understand, why would you leave one and go to the other? Mm-hmm. But for all of us, it's understanding our why. Why do I do the things that I do and get up in the morning? And for me, it's about my family. So we always have vision, purpose, and goals. And purpose and vision can get interchangeable, but it's really, how do you deliver your purpose? Is financial services, it was one way. In coaching, I recognized and realized that I could help people have that significant change that I did, no matter where they were. Because when I worked with Bob that first time, we were fortunate enough. So I have 5 children. 3 of them came by the way of adoption after I worked with Bob, because they came from a different country. And I got to see the change in their life and the change of what they're going to change in the world. Like, one's a functional neurology chiropractor who's going to cure migraines. What better way than to want to be a coach so that I can help anyone have a change in their family, their clients, and community, and understand selling is service, the value of learning what Bob spent his whole life studying and researching. You can't replace that. And so it was, I'm going to go do that. Let's go help some people have the ability. And I also know it doesn't matter what the number is on your birthday. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter the number.
Well, what I love about that is we've been talking a lot about reinvention in this last series of podcast shows. And I think the world has told us, when I was coming up, as you got to a certain point, and only then would you, when you retired, would you get to do what you love. And I think all of these ideas, whether you call them paradigms or what, like we're breaking through so many of them. And to say, who says so? Right? Who says so? So I love the fact that you saw the opportunity. And tell me a little bit, for those people who are not familiar with Bob Proctor, is how would you describe Bob's style of coaching? Of what does he open up for people?
He opens up possibilities. So I'll actually speak to 2 aspects of it. So I'm a science math nerd. When Sandy Gallagher came along and partnered with Bob Proctor, Bob had done all the research. And the names that people might not know, but like J.B. Ryan from Duke and Thurman Fleet, Leland Bell Vanderwall. His favorite book was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, but it was the ability. See, in Bob's world, he went from earning $4,000 to, in 1 year, earning $150,000 to over $1 million. And the benefit for everyone is that rather than just be happy with the $1 million, he wanted to know what the heck happened and how did this get changed. I read the book. He would give the book to everybody and they wouldn't have the same significant change. So that's important for people to understand, because it was the ability to then start understanding not everybody reads this and does this. Mm-hmm. And it was then to put together, and I don't like the word processes and systems because people hear that. But in essence, when Sandy Gallagher joined him, she did take all of that and put it in a repeatable, and I will say process, that no matter what level we're at, it's applicable. And so heavily research-based, paradigm-driven, and helps a person understand them. Because here's what Bob used to always tell us. You're the problem, but you're the solution. And it was to empower people to know that they actually have that ability to change their life without thinking, I just need the next marketing thing. I just need the next thing. I just need the next shiny object. And that's what he did so well.
Yes. And I believe, so much of what we're told is we have to follow a program, a framework, a process. This is the way it must be done. And it takes away our power. Mm-hmm. Whereas it sounds like what you are doing when you're working with clients using this approach is helping them realize that they have the power within themselves.
Always. We're the problem, we're the solution.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. How do we get out of the idea, but the script says, or the program says, I have to do it this way? Where do you start to see people have the ability to open up their mind?
So the very initial beginning part of helping them see the crack is in goal setting. And this is where it's not a surprise. It's one of the first things that I worked on. Because if somebody comes in and just says, oh, I want to double my income, I'm like, but why? I mean, so just to spit off a number, and especially a recovering financial service person, and I tell everyone, I have a funnel in my head, but we all do. Because if I ask you what your number is, like, what do you want it to be? They don't really know why that number is coming out of their mouth. And so a lot of the work is to help them get past the preconditioning of what parents put in, what society put in, what bosses put in, and to really get to the point that they are grasping at straws to try to come up with what they really want. Because if I ask somebody to write down, most people can write down 10 or 15 goals. Mm-hmm. It's pretty easy. But I want them to do 100. And that process is meant to pull out of them a way for them to start piecing this together as to what's important. Earl Nightingale had a great, and depending on the person, we just use different tools. Earl's was write down what you think are the big goal, whether we call it C-type goals or a BK goal. And then the next morning, look at that list and then really ask yourself, is it really a big goal? And then cross off all the ones that aren't and then do it again and keep doing that. Because if they don't understand that, they're not going to do the difficult things I'm going to ask them to do in the process of studying them if they're going to give up too easily on the goal and change it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think when I reached out to you even to schedule this podcast, I saw your post on LinkedIn about those 100 goals. And I thought, that would be really hard for us when we start thinking about that. But when you get to your why and get to some of the underlying things, but again, we don't slow down long enough to do those things. And I know one thing that is really so effective of what you do, Ellen, is helping people understand that the words they use, the beliefs they have, are predictors of what their life looks like. Why is it that, where's the disconnect where people don't get that?
Because we don't take a moment to stop and reflect how it showed up in the past. And one of the best ways to understand it is to really help them. We don't focus a lot on the past, but one of the easiest ways I help them understand. So if anyone has kids and past the teenage years where they were driving, because this is what I want them to understand. When that child has the car and they're out past curfew and it's 2 a.m. in the morning and they're not home and they're way past curfew, where do your thoughts go? They're in a ditch, they're in an accident, they're dead, you name it, it goes right down it. So, but the longer we would hold something that in front of our mind is what causes it to become true. Now, that's just a great example because most parents don't stay there long.
Right.
But when we're in school, if we think we're good in one subject or not another one, is a really great way to just sort of like peel the layer back. So I tell the story of my first major was nuclear medicine. Don't ask me why. I know.
Well,
Yeah. You have to take organic chemistry in nuclear medicine. I took it, I got a D. I took it again, I got a D. And then I'm like, I am changing my major because years later, here's what I now know about nuclear medicine. It's an organic chemistry. That class was just memorizing.
mm-hmm.
Can I memorize? Yes. Could I do that memorization? No. Because everybody knew how hard those classes were. And to this day, I will say in a group of people, how many of you pre-med students dropped med because of organic chemistry or pharmacist or had to take it more than once? That's because we keep talking about it.
Yes.
So when there's something we've been trying to learn, it's what we think about what we're trying to learn. And that's usually, we're tied up when it's money and job focus. So, it's funny to me, like people think cooking is hard. I'm like, really? People, it's a science project. But again, it's like you have to meet them where they're at. And I need to find those type of explanations where they'll go, oh, it's what I thought about it. Because they might have thought something when they were in school, but then years later they were able to achieve something they didn't think they could.
Yes. And I run into the same thing myself. I have told myself this story that when it comes to technology, I'm not good at it. But when I could get past that and see that it's perhaps that I choose not to participate, like I just don't want to take the time to learn the skill. Well, that's something different. So I think, what we tell ourselves, and that's where it goes back to sales. What story are we telling ourselves about the sales process? And are we really serving people, or is it about our fear of rejection that they might say no? And so what, maybe it's not the right time. So Ellen, one thing, a word that we're hearing more and more today is quantum leap. There's even a show on television, I believe, that has the word quantum in it. Like, that's a really cool world. What is a quantum leap? And is that really possible?
So I'll answer the second question first. Yes, it's possible.
Yes.
But when a person is typically in a quantum leap, they don't know they're in a quantum leap. Because by definition, it's not linear. So in our logical mind, we think we can grow 10, 15, 20% a year using business growth. Quantum leaps are doubling and tripling, quadrupling, whatever. And you don't know you're in the quantum leap while you're in it because it takes activity. So yes, it's possible. It does get thrown around way too much sometimes. But my simplest way of helping somebody understand is you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a quantum leap. Like, that is the definition of insanity. You cannot have a quantum leap doing the same things. So coaching unlevels the playing field, meaning we have to identify, I got to try something new. I think Dr. Benjamin Hardy has a book out called 10X is greater than 2X. Same process, but it gets a person to understand 10Xing is easier than just working harder. When Bob was alive and he used to give seminars, his favorite question in the beginning of it would be, how many of you in the room think that by just working a little bit harder, you'll make more money? Everybody raises their hand. And in reality, I try to get people to understand you actually don't have to work harder. You can work less.
Yes. And that's mind-blowing because that's not what we're taught. We're not taught to go there.
No.
So Ellen, as we start to wrap up here, I know that one area that you have a particular affinity for is working with women in particular. I noticed this was on on your LinkedIn profile. What are some of the struggles women are facing today where they could benefit working with someone like you?
Women don't speak up soon enough. We stay in our head too long and we give up. I was just at the National Women Business Enterprise National Conference, WeBank is the acronym, with a lot of corporations, like big corporations, Toyota, Bank of America, you know the name, who are trying to figure out how to have the buzzwords now are gender and pay equality. It's always interesting when the corporations want to get on the bandwagon. But what some recognize, they do not have the answer yet, is that they're losing women earlier than what they thought, because what they don't understand is that these women don't see a path that looks like them. Mm-hmm. And when they don't see a path upward that looks like them, and if they believe that they don't have the tenacity or the ability to move up when all they see are men, then they make decisions. I'm going to go start my own company. I'm going to and it's not even just start my own company. They tell themselves the story that I'll just be okay as long as I just have this job, because then it just becomes a job. So companies don't know they're losing them sooner. Women start telling themselves a story that gets ingrained. It's like a tire, creating a rut in their mind. So it takes work. It takes work for all of us to replace those paradigms that we've accepted. And I always say this, I work with some men, they're special unicorns, because any woman who's been in a high level position, or like I did sales for an asset management company, I was always the first woman, recognizes there's no one to have a conversation with about the challenges. And there's been studies, men will apply to a job if they only have 50% of the qualifications. A woman has to have 100% plus to feel that they can apply. And so that's why I want them to understand that that's the story that they're telling themselves.
No, and a really great point that if they don't see that path there, they feel like it's not possible. Right. So I see such a benefit for them being able to work with you. And I am seeing it as well. I'm seeing so many women that are walking out of corporate saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to start my own thing. And again, still beneficial to be able to work with a coach. Yep. Well, Ellen, I know you've got a free resource for our listeners. You want to tell us what it is?
So, my least favorite word is procrastination, but it really is for anyone listening with how to propel your business forward and stop procrastinating. And I would just add, we just have to get out of our own way. So I debated about even putting that word in the title, because again, it creates and it evokes emotion, but most will identify that at some level they procrastinate, because we would be where we wanted to be in business if we didn't. And so, yes, I put together a free resource for them. All they have to do is reach out and I will get it in their hands.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, we'll get a link and we'll put in the show notes for them. I know that procrastination, sometimes shows up of, I need to get one more certification, or I don't have everything perfect yet, or some excuse that we are limiting ourselves in doing that. So I'll be looking for that free resource as well, Ellen. But Ellen, if people are interested in working with you or want to learn more about you, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, a few places. I play around on LinkedIn, as you said, because I know that's where my people are. So they can find me, Ellen Tyler Coaching. They can shoot me an email, ellen@ellentylercoaching.com. Those are the main places I play in. They can find me on Facebook, but I don't play there as often. I serve the people on LinkedIn.
That's great. That's great. And you do have a great website. So again, we'll put all of that in the show notes. Ellen, thank you for being with us today and providing this just new insights that we do have the potential, but we are the ones that get in our way. And working with a coach like you, I've seen all the testimonials and the great feedback. Reach out to Ellen. So thank you so much, Ellen.
Thanks, Lisa. Awesome day.
Yes. Yes, thanks. And so for those of you that enjoyed this episode, if you'd like to subscribe and leave a review, that was how other people find the show. But until next week, go chase your passion, live out your purpose, and show up with a personal brand of integrity. Because when you align with your legendary self is how you become the person you're meant to be. Thanks until next week.